Hello everyone. So now, build up complete. Raid complete. Life in Algiers complete. But what was the reaction like back in the British Isles? And I'm sure you'll want to know more about the people we've name-checked in the story, right? Well, here we go. Now, I will say that I've noticed I've been slacking on historical details like dates, and given that this is supposed to be a history podcast, that's just not good enough. So, get ready for dates. Imagine being dragged out of your beds by men speaking a foreign language. By the time you set sail, you're hoping the King's Navy will save you. However, they have refused to come. Why? Essentially, they don't have lunch money. You might think that's a joke, but yes, Captain Hook of the 5th Line's Whelp literally refused to give chase because he wasn't victualled. For this episode, let the paper trail begin. After that, I'm going to give you a fuller portrait of each of the bigger players and main characters. Now, this pirate raid, as with others at the time, functioned as a sort of stress test. One which the British government spectacularly failed. But anyway, let's go back to the 20th of June 1631. The response, poor as it was, began almost as soon as the ships hoisted anchor. Before dawn, news reaches a local man called Thomas Bennet. His intelligence is fragmented, but he trusts the escapees enough to immediately fire off a letter to James Salmon, who is based in Castlehaven, which is, in the scale of things, right beside him. To his credit, Salmon does spring into action, trying to use all resources he can. One of his neighbours is a Mr. Paulet, and he owns a boat. Salmon begs, and Paulet refuses. There's no exact reason given, but to be fair, I wouldn't want to go up against a 300-ton pirate ship either, would you? Salmon quickly realises Paulet is out of the question, so he sends his messenger on a horse to Kinsale, the nearest point of command, so to speak. Enter again Captain Hook. Now, I did kinda give this away already, but regardless, the 5th Line's Whelp, the naval presence in southwest Cork, is in Kinsale. Now, if you remember, Baltimore was founded as a settlement by Thomas Crook, and it just so happens that around the same time as this, his son, Sir Samuel Crook, pens a letter to the Sovereign of Kinsale. Salmon has also sent his man to, once he's finished in Kinsale, ride all the way to Mallow. This was to go even higher along the chain of command, to the Lord President of the province of Munster. Even in the 21st century, this journey would take about 2 hours in a car, so imagine doing it on horseback in 1631. He immediately allows and commands the go-ahead for Captain Hook to begin the rescue mission. But it is, of course, not that simple. Instead of immediately jumping into action, Captain Hook sends a written reply. He declares that we cannot go to meet the Turk until we are victualled. In short, as I teased in the opening to this episode, they have no food, or at least nowhere near enough food, to feed a large enough crew to take on the might of the Republic of Salé. Oh, and also, his men haven't been paid in 10 months. Yep, almost a year of no payment for their work. The Crown has not paid its servants in almost a year. That's something that definitely wouldn't fly in today's day and age. And it isn't just the Navy. King Charles I has big financial struggles in the early 1630s. This is mostly because he is trying to rule in a way that ignored the need for the Parliament. However, it is Parliament who sets taxes, so it's almost impossible for him to raise them. If you know literally anything about economics, and I know practically nothing, you'd know taxes are essentially the government's fundraising. No taxes means no funds, means cost cutting, and one of the hardest areas hit is the Navy. This is compounded by the fact that a huge number of the contractors who were paid to supply food or gunpowder simply pocketed the money without providing the goods. Now, Captain Hook does eventually get his provisions, but it's several days later, and by that stage, Murat and the captives are long gone. Hook realises how bad it'll look for the British Navy, so he does give chase, but he never even catches sight of the man-o'-war or Palaka. Now, if you've any cynical bone in your body about politics, you'll be delighted to hear what Captain Hook does next. He starts a rumour, one with absolutely zero truth to it. According to this rumour, the Baltimore captives were intercepted by Spanish authorities and they'd be back soon. And that is only the start of what would become the blame game. Starting, as we've seen, right from the 20th of June 1631 all the way to December, every official on the island of Ireland is basically saying, "What you looking at me for?" The Earl of Cork, Richard Boyle, is furious at this national embarrassment. He, and this is important, doesn't want another attack happening, because his own vast estates could be next. He promptly orders the removal of Captain Hook from his command. Captain Hook was used as the first of the fall guys, so to speak. Hook, for his part, as I mentioned a minute ago, blames the provisions supplier in Bandon, but he is actually backed up in a letter by one of Cork's 17th century big shots, Sir William Hall. In the letter, Hall is worried about the information which the two ship captains could have given to the pirates, so offers to send 2 cannons to the coastal defences. But he also says that the Cork coast has a complete and total lack of gunpowder. What are guns without gunpowder? No food or pay to the navy, and no gunpowder for the cannons. So what do the authorities do? They find a scapegoat. And yes, it is the obvious one. John Hackett. If you've forgotten, he was the Dungarvan-based fisherman who piloted the raid away from Kinsale and to Baltimore. After the raid, the corsairs just abandoned him to his fate on the beach at Baltimore. And this, dear listener, is the story of his fate. Within a matter of hours or days, Hackett is found arrested and sent to prison in Cork. Before the year is out, he is tried at the Cork Assizes, or courts, in what is essentially an open and shut case. Charged with treason and conspiracy. Of course, he is convicted. But remember, the governing forces of Ireland need to show that they are taking the matter serious. So, of course, they decide to make an example of the Dungarvan fisherman John Hackett. John Hackett is condemned to death. But not just any death. He is condemned to die by hanging on a hill overlooking and facing the very ruined village of Baltimore, which he guided Murat Reis and his band of corsairs into from the coast. For a minute, dear listener, look at this from John Hackett's perspective. You are a local fisherman on what is, in the grand scheme of things, a tiny boat. On a warm June day, you are suddenly set upon by a band of hundreds of heavily armed, perfectly trained pirates, shouting at you in a language you do not understand, with what are clearly threats. Their captain, likely with death threats, demands you pilot them into what is the heavily defended port of Kinsale. If you refuse to guide them towards the fortified town, you will instantly be hacked to death on the deck of your own boat, or become a galley slave. It's pilot or die, so you decide to guide them to a softer target of Baltimore. He could be seen, with hindsight, as a victim of ultimate coercion. But of course, the authorities of the day didn't see it that way. Also, one key detail almost signed his death warrant alone, that had nothing to do with the crime. He was, and I quote, an Irish papist. That is, a Catholic. The English Protestants would have been cynical of Catholics anyway, so when one of them pilots a ship to attack a Puritan settlement. It's pretty clearly sectarian, right? It was in their eyes anyway. Psychologically, as well, believing he did it out of religious hatred is easier than he just saw how poor the naval organisation was. So, Hackett hangs, and the blame game is shuffled. But it wasn't only the island of Ireland that heard about it. In London, there's a massive security panic, as you'd expect. And it's not like the panic is short-lived. It lasts until 1645 at least. Even Benjamin Whitcomb in Marseille writes of a rumour in December 1631 of incoming attacks, but this time on the British coastline itself. As a result, cavalry units are sent and beacons are set up. But this is really a case of locking the door after the horse has bolted. Now I'm going to tell you a little tidbit that might actually shock you. At the very same time as this, just after the sack of Baltimore, King Charles I is in talks for a diplomatic treaty with the Republic of Salé. If that place sounds familiar, it is because that is where Murat Reis is from. And now it is time to discuss the efforts, if you could even call them that, for ransom or diplomacy of the Baltimore captives. The English knew of their arrival in Algiers thanks to James Frizzell, who we mentioned in an earlier episode. On the 10th of August 1631, Frizzell notes the arrival and origins and urges the English government to send ransoms or whatever it takes to get them released before they are absorbed into Algerian life. The government give a flat no. 2 years pass and Frizzell sends another plea, this one including the note about the number who'd either died or turned Turk that I mentioned in the last episode. You might remember I mentioned a mission sent in 1645. Well, the guy sent to lead that expedition is an Edmund Case, and it isn't a simple case of, here's money, give me back my people. It takes him about a year to negotiate the release, which, if you remember, had only 2 of the Baltimore captives. In the last episode, I called one of them Alan Hawkins, but it was actually a woman called Ellen Hawkins, along with Joan Broadbrook, whose name I did manage to get right. Anyway, it's at this point that I'm going to officially say we've reached the end of the narrative of the sack of Baltimore. But it's time to get into the second episode I'm going to release today, and focus on the lives of the people behind the names in the story. Thanks for listening. Like this if you can. Tell me what you did and didn't like. Follow me on Instagram at Liam Blake Podcaster, and, most importantly, tell everyone about the History and Heritage Podcast. Bye!